Hey, I want to talk to you. I want to move into this section of uh, your book for this week, and I chose this because this begins to get us into the meat of the course. We're still going to do a lot of these glials and neurons and myelin sheaths and all that uh, monkey business. But I want to get you moving in the direction of how behavior, uh, where it comes from, and stuff related to that. So, a definition of behavior, a simple definition is it's a change in activity, and this is a general description. It's a change of activity of an organism in response to a stimulus. Boy, I could go on for hours and days about this. Um, Darwinism is basically a comment on response to a stimulus, an adaptation, and that's what behavior in some cases is. When you study the biology of behavior, you're looking at evolution. Now, before we go any further, let me explain something about this evolution business. We're in a Christian university. Evolution is a questionable thing as far as our attitude toward it is concerned. I'm not trying to teach you that evolution is the correct way to view creation. I'm a creationist. I don't mind telling anybody that. I don't really believe in Charles Darwin stuff, but here's a caveat. If there is some sort of an evolutionary process, uh, then obviously our uh, belief system would indicate that there's somebody in charge of that. So saying that an amoeba crawled on shore and turned into a human being, I think's rather ridiculous, but that's Darwinism. But could something have altered things to make things work as they are? We weren't created from an amoeba. We know what we were created from. We know how we were created. If you study the Bible, uh, but with all that in mind, this being a biology class, we at least have to look at this biology business because you can't deny biology. Did God build it? Yeah, He sure did. Nothing happened by whoops. How'd that come about? God is in control of everything. This is not a Christian sermon. This is an explanation. So for the next few minutes, sit back and relax, and don't think that I'm trying to convert you away from your beliefs. I'm trying to tell you what we're studying in terms of behavior, and it's biological based stuff. So we look at an idea. And again, this is touchy business. The idea that behaviors are the result of pressures that humans encountered. Could we have had that built into us? Yes. Uh, it's a natural thing. People study animal behavior to see why humans behave like they do. Uh, Psychology uh, compares behaviors. Why does this person behave this way, that person behave that way, and so on and so forth. And what it begins to introduce to us uh, is the factor of genes and DNA, RNA, all these things that you're familiar with, and the transfer of that in generation to generation to generation. There's a word, ethology. Ethology is a study, it's an extended study of genetics, evolution, anatomy, physiology, and some other biological disciplines. Uh, but you can't study behavioral biology without studying comparative psychology. So we kind of study both ethology and comparative psychology. We want to eliminate some things and we want to include some things. One of the areas that we work in are areas like innate. I'm going to try to stay away from the sordid details to keep this thing a little bit shorter for you, because we could sit here for the next 3 or 4 or 5 hours and talk about this, and that's not what we're going to do. A goal of behavioral biology is to pull out innate behaviors that have strong genetic components, and they are independent of environmental influences. They're independent from the learned behaviors. Learned behaviors come from environmental conditioning. Now, if you don't believe that, then all you got to do is look at your own life. What's in your life? Perceptions, teachings, morals, a value system, conscience, etc. So a lot of these things are learned. They're taught to you. These non-innate behaviors, instinct. An instinctual behavior really carries with it a lack of incorrect behavior because it's a survival thing. The instinctual / innate behavior is really basically hardwired into your system. It's hardwired into your brain. Learned behaviors are riskier. They're flexible. They're dynamic. And they can be altered according to the changes that you interact with. So let's look a minute at these things, and I'll give you kind of an overall rundown of this, and then we'll call it a day. Innate behaviors. What does that involve? Innate, instinctual, rely on response to stimuli. For instance, the reflex action, and it's an involuntary and rapid response to a stimulus. Have you ever been to the doctor and he takes his little rubber hammer and pops you on the tendon? People say we hit you on the kneecap. No, he doesn't. He pops you on the patella tendon right below your kneecap, and that stimulates nerves, and that in turn makes your knee jerk. It makes your leg go forward. That's similar to somebody that puts their hand on a hot stove. You immediately, instinctively pull your hand away most of the time before you even touch it, hopefully. We still, as human beings, have a lot of innate behaviors. Now, let's even get deeper. There are 2 words here. These might be new words to you, and I'll go through these. Kinesis and taxis. Kinesis, undirected movement in response to a stimulus. Orthokinesis, it's increased or decreased speed of movement of an organism in response to a stimulus. If you are if your hand goes near a stove, you're going to immediately pull it away unless there's something wrong with you. That would be a description of orthokinesis. The movement is rather random, but increases the probability that you're going to reduce the potential for injury. And then there's something called klinokinesis. That's an increase in turning behaviors. Now, I know all this is crazy, but that's you seeking out a more hospitable environment. So I'm walking down it's cold out, and I seek out warmth. That would be klinokinesis. I know this sounds goofy, but these are the building blocks for all of this. A more directed version of this is called taxis, and that's a directed movement towards or away from a stimulus. Phototaxis, that deals with light, Chemotaxis, that would be chemicals. Geotaxis, gravity. There's you move positive or negative from the source of the stimulus. It's even in like amoeba. I mentioned amoeba earlier. Bacteria, seen under the microscope, when they're stimulated in certain ways, they react in a particular way. So all of this starts at the cellular level. It's amazing to watch this stuff. If you ever get a chance, maybe you can YouTube it, Google it, and watch experiments done with this stuff called kinesis and taxis. Really, really interesting. We also have something called fixed patterns, fixed action patterns. Um, this is uh, an interesting thing. For instance, if you take a fish out of the water, it still tries to swim, even though its medium is no longer surrounding it. So we move this thing into a we move this thing into an unnatural environment, and it still tries to do the things that it would be doing in the water, particularly in this case, trying to escape. And you can even go as far as things like migration, long range seasonal movements of animals. We're talking a lot about animals, aren't we? The evolution of resource availability. So birds fly south for the winter to get into warmer climates, for example. There's more food in a warmer climate. You've all heard about spawning grounds for salmon. That's where the bear go fishing. They migrate to their spawning grounds. That's where they mate. So, emperor penguins. I mean, you can Google all this stuff if you want to get that involved with learning how this stuff works. So, it's all related to behavior. Foraging. Animals forage. Innate behavior, living in groups. Interaction with others in the group. Communication within a species. And this is a biggie. Um, we do it. Animals do it. We send signals. In our case, we have the ability to speak. Animals that don't have other means to communicate. Their tails, the way they do their feathers, for example. Uh, Apes. Jane Goodall studied apes, and they have particular ways of communicating, showing love by grooming their mate or somebody, their children, that they give birth to, whatever the case is. Um, so any number of communication, uh, what's a good word for communication potentials? Um, Birds. By the way, let me ruin you about birds. You get up in the morning, you hear in the spring or summer and all the wonderful bird calls. Let me tell you something. They're not singing stuff to each other. A lot of that has to do with territorial protection. A lot of that is some of it. I shouldn't say all of it. Some of it is a communication that this is my area. Get out of here. Uh, but they do sing to one another to attract mates. So whales do the same thing. Male crickets, different chirping sounds to attract mates. So it's an amazing world when you think about what these what these things do. Now, there's a behavior that's kind of more associated with altruism, and that's altruistic behavior. What is that? It's sincere behavior. That's more of a human thing than an animal thing, but guess what? Animals do it too. So don't lose the point we're making here is the biology of behaviors. Um, if I'm going to do something to help you and I'm doing it for your benefit, not for mine, then that's considered altruistic. That's a sincere way to help you. There's a zillion and one studies that have been done, group interaction or the failure of it, I'm trying to think of the word I want to use. Apathy. There are a lot of stories about people who, uh, in groups, won't go to the aid of someone because they think somebody else should do it or will do it. So they don't act. And one person does, and that person does it because this person needs help, and that's all they want. They don't want somebody to pat them on the back for helping this person who is in need. They're doing it because they know the person needs help. So is all of this genetic? That's really the big question. Do we learn that, or do we? Is it built into us? Uh, Not all of it is answerable. We don't know whether or not, in many cases, if you are an altruistic person by genetics or if you learn that by being taught. It could be part of your personality. Simple question, hard to answer. There are some simple learned behaviors. Um, most most what I've talked about, kind of rambling on, I apologize, are innate or have an innate component with some controversy with the altruistic stuff. So when we look at innate behaviors, we have to consider what I've just talked to you about. Can we learn a different way to behave, even though the original behavior is innate? They're inherited. They don't change in response to signals from the environment. Learned behaviors do, but they have instinctive components. If you want to boil it down to one word, you can boil it down to survival. We do things, even select mates, out of procreating humanity. So there's a need that's inborn to want to associate with like kind. And that leads to this simple behavior business. And there are two things that have to be considered. And I'm really almost done because if I go too far, I'm going to start teaching you about Pavlov. That's not my point. Habituation is a simple form of learning where you stop responding to a stimulus after repeated exposure. Now, I could get down to the cellular level, but I won't. There are receptors in touch, for example, that after a while refuse to send information to the brain due to habituation. It's constant. It's repeated exposure to something. You live near a railroad track, and you've lived there most of your life. Are you aware that the train goes by? Yes. But is it a focal point for you? No. Habituation takes it out of that. Sometimes you don't even know the train went by. Did your brain, did hearing work? Yeah. But it probably didn't transmit the meaning of that due to habituation. So it's a non-associative form of learning, and then it can easily be put in the background, so to speak. And the other thing to consider within that realm with this simple learned behavior business, habituation and imprinting. And that occurs at a particular age or life stage. It's rapid and it's independent of whatever the species is. It could be a duck, it could be a person, it could be anything. So you have been through this at birth. As you mature, though, you filter out this imprinting. The first large moving thing seen is what an animal imprints on. If they see if you hatch a duck, I'm just using ducks as an example. If you hatch a duck without the mother duck being present, guess what? You become the mother duck in their sight. They will later on, if you remove yourself from the picture and introduce mother duck within a certain period of time, then the imprint changes. So these are just things that set the stage for what we'll be talking about later. We'll talk about conditioned behavior, and we'll talk about some classical conditioning. We'll be talking about quite a bit of stuff: operant conditioning, cognitive learning, stuff that you got when you were in intro to psych. So to sum it all up, behaviors are responses to stimuli. They can be instinctual/innate, not influenced by the environment, or learned, which are influenced by the environment. Instinctual behaviors include things like mating systems, methods of communication. We all want to communicate at birth, believe it or not. Learned behaviors would be imprinting, habituation, conditioning, cognitive learning. Probably the most powerful learning there is, cognitive learning being, just to backtrack just for a moment, cognitive learning involves an effort on your part. So cognitive learning is learning detail, learning by using all five senses. Powerful learning. Cognitive learning is not just associated with animals, but it's also with human beings. We're animals, so whatever. So if you have questions, shoot me an email. But that's basically what we're going to be talking about the rest of the 5 weeks we got left. Is it 4, 6 weeks, 5 weeks? I don't know. So there you have it. Kind of a longer deal than I wanted it to be, but at least get you going in the direction that I want you to go in. All right. See ya.